I see a lot of people on Twitter. They say, I'm all in favor of immigration restriction, but I don't like these heavy-handed tactics. Okay, well, how do you think we're going to do it? Exactly. You want to deport 1 million people per year. That's 4,000 people per day. They don't want to leave. They'd rather take their chances with ICE and Border Patrol and DHS than go back home voluntarily. How do you get 4,000 people every single day to leave the country when they don't want to leave? Well, you have to coercively remove them. You have to pick these people up, throw them in a car, put them in a cage, and then take them back to where they came from.
First of all, when these people come out and go, Tim's a bootlicker for defending us, I'm like, no, you misunderstand. It's my boots. It's mine. I voted for them. I'm wearing the boot. I'm stomping on the ground. I ain't licking anybody. I'm clapping for these people that I said, please go out and enforce the law.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts, teacher and socialist Andy Lewson, and socialist and community college maths professor Michael Hoffman. We're online at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as @DonEduardoBarca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. We have merch as well. If you fancy a shirt like my partner is wearing, contact us to our site at whatsleftpodcast.com. Thank you. And everyone in the Spanish language world, there is also What's Left podcast, Spanish version, Que Queda de la Izquierda. I am co-hosting there, and you can always join us there. Thank you very much. All right, why don't we get started? Andy, why don't you tell us what the topic, since this was not an idea that Michael and I had, or maybe it was actually.
Oh, it was, yeah.
That's true.
I think Michael started the ball rolling last week, and it was before. I think he started talking about it, like saying, "Hey, maybe we should talk about what's going on in Minneapolis," just before Alex Pretti was murdered. But before Alex Pretti was murdered, there was Renee Goode. And really what we're talking about is sort of what's been happening with ICE and immigration, the response to it, and the form it's taking now, what to make of it. On What's Left, we spent a lot of time. We haven't talked about it as much, but in the run-up to the elections, when on both sides of the aisle, whether it was Democrats or Republicans, there was this notion of, we've got to do something about cracking down on immigrants. We've got to do something about immigration. We saw not just the freedom movement fall for the language of, we've got to do something about immigration, but we saw many people on the left, your friend Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, and others, who were like, of course, we've got to do something, maybe not mass deportation, but more deportation or some sort of process. And for the longest time, we were like, look, no freedom movement worth calling itself a freedom movement is going to be for anything other than unrestricted movement of any worker anywhere they want to go. And the minute you open the door to saying the state is allowed to control that, you're going to see what you're going to see here, in part, like what you're seeing in Minneapolis. And it is the logical extension of these policies of controlling where workers go. I do want to say that ICE is operating in red states and ICE is operating in blue states. And the way ICE is being pushed in blue states is more aggressive than it is in red states in terms of the general provocation. They are going around and doing raids and checking people's papers and going into businesses, being on city streets. But I think from what I've heard, there's been a more provocative presence in place in the blue states. And I think that there's a political reason for that as well. But regardless, I do think that the thing I would say, the take-home message from this is everyone should, if you want truly a free world, then we've got to stop even allowing the state to take any role in restricting the movements of workers. And like we said before, in the same way that the war on terror, they talked about Islamic terrorism and things like that, or the war on drugs was like, we'll talk about the drug users and things like that. All these wars on things ultimately are wars on us. And I think you can really see that in starkly when you see these like just straight up murders with Renee Goode and Alex Pretti. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Like what's going on here?
Yeah. There is so much we can talk about always. And, I'm going to have an episode with my good buddy Jake, who took down all the Bantercast Live episodes from Bantercast on X, on Rumble, and all the other platforms we were on. I don't know why. I think he said something along the lines that he was afraid of people going after him, which is not reason. So anyhow, there were so many other episodes that I did with him where I thought it feels redundant. Like I'm saying the same thing we said in 2024 before Trump was elected. And we have been saying this even prior. And there was episodes on immigration, 2022. And I said to Jake that this is not about immigration. This is about control. And we're seeing it now with their facial recognition apps that they've just created by Homeland Security, because they've got a bunch of funding that was given to them by both Democrats and Republicans. And they are now able to have databases on US American citizens. I just saw it. They're not just doing it on people with illegal status. I'm doing that in quotation marks because this whole idea, and I've wanted to do this episode with Andy, I've been saying this whole idea of what is illegal and legal changes and shifts over time depending on which administration or which government deems that to be legal or illegal. And so now this facial recognition can scan your face. I mean, they can do it. They used to do it before. They used to scan your license plates, and now they scan your face. You're on the database. We all are. And if you are speaking up, I mean, this has become more than immigration. If you're speaking up now, then suddenly you are a domestic terrorist. You're on a watch list. So I said this. I said, we begin, well, not like I and you and all of us here. I mean, the government begins with the most vulnerable first. It states, it's the same thing in El Salvador with the gangs. First, you start with the gangs. First, you appease the public. And my partner says he's from Venezuela too. The reason why Chavez got in is because, of course, he started off with, you sell it. You have to sell your technocratic authoritarian tyranny by both Democrats or Republicans. I have to repeat because this isn't about left or right. You have to sell it first to appease. You have to make sure people want it and say, yes, we want that. Like in 9/11, when there was a scare and we wanted revenge. And people wanted to go to war. They were angry. They wanted, and the government used that very same emotional scare and revenge to go to war. So it's the same thing here. And I'm just baffled. I just don't know how else to communicate this. And it's so fucking frustrating that people don't get it. And I wish I could show Jake the episodes we had on of 2025 and see it 10 years from now, if we're alive 10 years from now. So it's like, you just see what's happening, because everyone who is standing on the position of it's after the illegals is complacent and complicit, as we said during COVID. You're just complacent and complicit. And no one should be showing their fucking papers. You shouldn't be showing, like we said this in 2020, you should not be showing your IV. They have a database. They already have you tracked if you're online and stuff like that. So just don't show. I don't know why people are saying you should always carry your ID. You don't need to. Now they have facial recognition. You don't have to. So I'm just so, I don't know. I can't cry, I can't get angry, I can't get sad. There's nothing else I can say. They're shooting US American citizens, citizens. I don't know if that's ringing a bell. Citizens, not illegal, citizens
Mhm.
for, like, Alex Pretti, Renee, Goode. And everyone is seeing video footage. People can see it from all angles. People are recording. And the government is lying. Like Christine Oman, her fucking stupid ass. Like, she's saying, what did she say? She said that he was brandishing a gun and came after the. No, no one saw that. No one. They're lying to your fucking eyes. Everyone has to wake up. And she's always lied, by the way. She said she met up with Kim Jong-un or someone, or Xi Jinping, I forget, someone in Asia. And then she retracted. And then when they confronted her, she just, again, she gave a politician answer. She's always been a fucking liar. She's a liar. And you think, and Trump, and beyond Trump, everyone, like I told Jake on the phone call just over the week, I said to him, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not defending I'm right now criticizing whoever's in power. And if Gavin Newsom's in power um, after Trump, I'll still criticize. So it's just mind-boggling. What do we do? How do we communicate? I don't know how else to communicate this to the public, to our friends, to our community, to MAGA supporters. There's a few conversations I've had. I've told you about those, Andy, with a family member of mine. They've changed their position. But, you know, what can I do? There isn't any, I don't know how else to communicate this. So it's really distressing. It's more stressful. And I see everything that's happening. And I do get angry. Sorry, I'm going to rant. This is the last thing. I do get angry with some of the people that are now protesting, and like their comrades from like 2011, John Avalo's mayoral campaign that I was a part of, and I was organizing with them, and they were so um, they were so pro masks and vaccines. And when I changed my position, as anyone can see online, because I've evolutionized over the years. People can see it online. That's what I keep telling my good buddy Jake. He thinks that I can't change my mind. I'm honest. It's like, yeah, I've changed my position. I used to like AOC. I don't like that bitch, and then suddenly people say to me, oh, you used to Bernie Sanders. Of course, but he's such a fucking fraud. And the thing is, I see my former, I don't want to say comrades, because I don't think we're on the same team, because at any one point, they might just, turn their backs on you. I told this to Andy too on the phone call. I don't know if I trust everyone, and I don't call them comrades if I don't feel comfortable with people who change their mind, are shifty, and suddenly flip flop, and then they, suddenly we're on the same page. Like suddenly censorship, when censorship was existing in 2020 and 2020 and 2021, and no one did anything about that. And so I see them stupidly saying the same thing, and I do feel for them because they're on the front lines. I see them online, and I'm appreciative. I just don't know if we're on the same team. I wish we were, but we're just not, because you're shifty, and I don't know if you're doing this for what trending, So we have to be consistent, and if you change your mind, good. Be honest. That's all right. No, nothing's gonna happen, But anyhow, so that's my reaction to this whole thing. First, my heart goes out to the family of Alex Pretti and people who've also been shot who are not citizens. They have also have recognition. I'll say their names in a bit. But that is my spiel right now.
I do feel like it's this is an escalation that is like on the part of the elites, that is does feel new. It feels especially brazen and provocative. Now, underlying that, though, the machinery of deportation is operating as normal, which is that the total number of actual deportations came in last year under Biden's. But so what's way up, though, is the detentions, right? So aside from like all the attention we're getting and the horrible things we're seeing, the deportation machine, I think it was something like close to 160,000 people deported. I need to, you know what? I'm going to check that number. I was supposed to look it up. But anyway, deportations are actually staying about constant.
Yeah.
It's the detentions. The one stat I saw this morning was that only under Biden, they only detained 25 children per day. But under Trump, they're detaining 170 children per day. And you also see this brazenness, this impunity, training these people to just outright lie in disgusting ways with the way that they then immediately pile on Renee Goode. There's, just smearing her, and same thing with Alex Pretti, like saying right after he was killed, "Oh, these are domestic terrorists," and that does feel like pretty like it is a somewhat like this is a new moment. It's different, has a very different feeling than like the post 9/11 crackdown, or I feel like we've built up to this kind of extreme level of impunity. However, I've also seen the evidence that people don't accept it. That I saw beautiful footage in LA of people battling with the uh, with the with ICE at their ICE detention center. Now, I don't think they actually freed anyone from any ICE detention centers, but there definitely was fights against the police, mass vandalization of government buildings. There was, what they called a general strike. Saw thousands of people coming out. I was, really happy to see that the call for a walkout that came from Minneapolis after Alex Pretti was picked up by, I think, students mostly across the board. And even like the school districts basically had to, like my own kid's school district sent out a thing like, okay, we know there's planned walkouts on January 30th. And so when I went to downtown San Mateo, it was like the schools had just basically said, okay, this is what you're doing today. You're going to walk out today. I mean, and there was, the downtown was just clogged with young people with anti-ICE signs. There's, clearly a public disgust. And Alex Pretti and the Renee Goode are the kind of high profile incident that gives this the kind of the demand of ICE out much broader appeal. And so I feel like it's much like other big protests that are letting people blow off steam because the liberal establishment basically had like, we have to go along with this. Meanwhile, what were the congressional Democrats doing? The congressional Democrats came up with their demands, which many people are mocking. They basically said, okay, we're going to shut down the government and we're going to withhold ICE funding unless you, 1, make them take off their masks, 2, put body cameras on them, 3, train them better, and I forget what else they did, but it's all this sort of ICE is just fine. They take their masks off, and no roving patrols or something. But the fact that the demand that emerged from the movement was ICE out in response to state violence, I do think means that there's a much more like it has a different content because that demand was attached to it. It's not like then the following up No Kings, which has no demands attached to it. This had very concrete demands. It was very much a reaction to state violence. And at my own college, even, people were basically where, it's been very difficult to get any of the mainstream groups involved at all. The actual student government said, we're going to walk out and and my favorite part of that was getting people to stand up and speak their mind. And people, person after person, was just talking about how terrible state violence is and how it's completely unacceptable, and like we don't want any deportations, and things that are kind of basic human liberty, human decency, human and actually completely kind of natural types of demands that are actually antithetical to what the state is actually doing, right? So there's there is a natural resistance, and it's an interesting case of, yes, there absolutely is a real reason why people organize mass demonstrations, combat against the police. The question is, where does it get to go? How does it reach? How does it maintain some kind of organized power to follow through on that demand? Is there a demand? Does that demand just kind of get forgotten with the election, or does that demand then develop a core group of people who are focused on winning that demand, who then will learn together through the ups and downs of the movement? So I do think it's a fundamentally different character to the No King stuff, which was led by older liberals. This was very much actually led by young people and by trade union folks in Minneapolis. I think the mayor was on board with it, right? So there's a dimension to it which really is like the Democrats are glad because this is Trump's policy and Trump is and so Democrats will go along with it a little bit, but what the Democrats then put forward is just essentially a plan to sanitize ICE without actually interrupting the deportation machine. So it will be very interesting to see what different layers of people learn from this. But I've talked to people. I talked to somebody who was like, Renee Goode was such an idiot, driving by the ICE people. And then someone else who was like, it's all the fault. All of this stuff is the fault of people who didn't vote in the last election because, they thought Palestine was more important and they should have voted for Kamala Harris because, and I'm honestly much more mad at the second one, because the first one is like kind of ignorant and callous, but the second one is so insidious and so much blaming people, and it also erases the fact that ICE has been developed by the Democratic and Republican parties, and that the I mean, just first of all, back when George Bush was president, the liberals went completely along with the Patriot Act in the name of fighting terrorism, which then ICE was established as it's basically specifically an enforcement mechanism distinct from the Immigration and Naturalization Services, which it was called before. It got changed to the Department of Homeland Security, right? And ever since they have been basically increasing the power of this deportation mechanism, and this is the natural result of the Democrats and Republicans working together to strengthen the arm of that state institution. And we now have seen, and to me, it's a result of the complete impunity that they've had, that we now see this open, brazen kind of terror campaign. I'm just, it lifts my mood when general strike is like a thing people are talking about, and then they actually kind of try to do it a little bit. I could be very critical about, did we actually shut down, but I just I have to admit, like, the fact that students at my college made a flyer, and I had nothing to do with it, that said general strike, walk out. And I was just like, oh my God, thank you. At least to just like get the idea in people's heads. But I'm not saying that there's going to be some magical rebirth of the left because of this. This is a long, hard fight, but it's just there's a hopefulness in that instinct to withhold labor and shut everything down. Whether or not they actually accomplished it, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it actually was a super economically impactful general strike. It was, but it felt powerful to the people who were involved, and that's both, has its pros and cons. But I was happy to see the resistance. But it's pretty scary how they're just getting away with shit so brazenly, and they always have in a way. I don't know. I'm actually struggling with that question. Like, how much of this is a departure in the sense of, yeah. So
I don't see that. That's the part that I don't think it's that much. I mean, we all know, we all agree that Fabio Vigi's discussion, like the characterization of what's happening with capitalism, means all things are going to get ratcheted up. But I actually don't see this as much of a departure from previous events. In fact, it's very much to me like the last major act in Minneapolis when they murdered what's the guy?
Oh, George Floyd.
George Floyd. When they murdered George Floyd, like for a moment you could have said there was something there.
Yeah.
But really, it was a run up. It was basically that whole thing was to essentially get Biden elected. And you can already feel that around this event. I agree with you that it's a good thing. People saying no general strike and things like that. I don't take seriously the end ICE demands, just like I don't take seriously the defund the police demands. Those were like cotton candy. They evaporated upon first contact with anything, and they were sucked up by the election. So I think this event, like I did kind of lay this out a little bit with saying that the U.S. state has been thoughtful in how it's using ICE. It goes into one area and it goes with a heavy hand. It goes to another area with a lighter touch. Still doing the goal of deportations, but as you noted, not as many as deportations as Biden. And like to watch Tim Walz come out here and pretend that he's the big governor fighting this, and the mayor of Mayor Frey and Ilhan Omar, all these people who are just connected to Obama and defended anything Obama did under the deporter in chief way back in the day. Like it's just all hypocrisy, but it does have the effect for all the people who said, oh, good thing that Charlie Kirk was killed. All the people on the left. I'm so glad he was killed. Now we get the other side that says, oh yeah, that Alex Pretti, he had it coming, or Renee Goode had it coming. She had pronouns on her. Da 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 da. They're playing this game of sort of ginning up the red side against the blue and the blue side against the red, certainly making it so that not only are we all in favor of defending the borders, or we're needing some kind of process, but we're also in favor of the state using its power against our enemies. Like and it was the Democrats have been just as vigorous supporters of the state coming down with its heavy hand over the last 6 years, as the Republicans. And this whole thing of like, oh my God, Trump's out of control. It's like, I do believe this is a continuity of agenda, except the fact that the agenda is going to get more aggressive because of where capitalism is at. So I feel like this actually is a perfect thing, a perfect event. I'm not saying these things were. I don't think Alex Pretti wasn't killed intentionally or Renee Goode, but I think there's an intentionality of being more aggressive in the blue states than the red states, just so you can have this sort of effect that really allows both sides to be built. It allows both sides to reconstitute themselves for the coming 2026 election, which is what this is going to be about. And certainly, it allows you to maybe ignore the Jeffrey Epstein, maybe ignore war in Iran, maybe ignore Venezuela, and have this be the thing that people are talking about. But in many ways, the real thing that I think is so useful about keeping this immigration thing in front of people is, one, it just continues to allow the state to strengthen itself. I think they're talking about a 5-fold increase in ICE funding, or in over the next few years, and a bill coming out about that. They're talking about at least a $500 billion increase in defense spending, or war spending, or whatever you want to call it, Department of Defense, Department of War, I feel like what it really hides, what allows to be hidden, is the fact that this notion that our financial security is threatened by these people moving across borders is such a fraud. When, if you were going to talk about a replacement theory, you would not be looking at an immigrant, you'd be looking at a computer. You'd be talking about AI. You'd be talking about what's happening digitally in this world and in this country. And I feel like these kind of events allow both sides. It allows the Democratic Party to be built, the Republican Party to be built in response to it, and it prepares everything again for another. This will be the most important elections of our lifetime. The most important midterms of our lifetime, because we can send a message to Trump that of some sort, or for the Trump base, we can defend the Trump legacy, and because people are going, there are absurd things people are going out there defending in terms of what happened to Alex Pretti is just a straight up state murder. Like, he was trying to defend somebody who some ICE agent had pushed to the ground. Some woman had been pushed to the ground. They pepper spray him. They beat him up on the ground, and then they see he has a gun. They pull the gun out from his back, and then bang, bang, bang. They shoot him a bunch of times, and they shoot him again while he's down on the ground. Straight up execution. I mean, and then I don't even want to get in. Well, maybe I'll get in later, but on the right, people who say you have the right to bear arms and you have the right to defend yourself from the state, and they're saying, well, he had a gun, he should be shot, or they had a right to do that. It's like, I mean, there's no principle on any side, and it's really unfortunate. We've seen that the right has no principle here. We've seen that the left has no principle here. I personally, I do agree with you, Michael, that it is good that the general strike thing is being thrown out there. I don't get a sense, and particularly with the degree to which our schools kind of supported it, they're doing that for a reason, and they're doing that because they know where all this leads. This is not going to lead to anything that's going to threaten the establishment. It's going to lead towards massive voter turnout, blue voter turnout if they can, on one side. And then, of course, the Republicans are going to try their massive red voter turnout. And it's disappointing. For me, it's maddening, and it's also disappointing to see how they get to use this red-blue game, and get to talk about things like civil war. Like there is no civil war happening. Red and blue are the same, but they are getting people who claim red to hate blue, and the people who claim blue to hate red, even if they actually have very similar politics in many ways. So that is very useful for the state.
What do you think about the narrative about that this is leading up to voter suppression in the blue states? Have you heard that?
I haven't heard too much about that.
Okay.
What can you say more about that?
That's what some folks described as part of the immediate purpose was to have sort of a network of voter intimidation via ICE on the ground for the elections.
It was under Biden that the Department of Homeland Security became the primary controller and runner of the federal elections. So it's but all that is a restatement of this whole event is about the elections, and so it's crazy because it was that was a big deal under Biden. He was like, I'm going to use all this nonsense they're saying about the 2020 election to basically secure our election system by putting it in the hands of DHS. And like people were like, oh, great. Now they're going to come around and say, oh, look, there's a plan here to keep people, to suppress a vote on one side. It's like, no, it's like, this is, no, I guess I just would say that doesn't seem right to me. That seems like a restatement of the fact that the most important thing we can learn about this event is how to vote.
Can you say more about that? Like, how do you know when that decision was made?
Oh, DHS?
Yeah.
2021. Like, basically it was, I can't remember all the avenues of it, but it really made it much more difficult to get transparency on how voting would work, because this was basically saying Russia was, keep our elections clear from Russia or China coming in. It was basically saying we're going to defend our homeland by defending our electoral our system. So DHS is going to be primarily responsible for defending the sanctity of our electoral system.
Would have been like after the insurrection.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And like, people, Democrats didn't lose any sleep over the woman who was murdered there. So we've been here before. This is nothing new. Democrats and Republicans have been trained. No, U.S. workers have been trained on how to be indifferent to the state using violence against what they believe are their political opponents. And both sides are getting played on that. And immigration is a particular example of that, because we all think we're being made safer by strengthening the state to keep workers out of here. And in reality, we're cutting off our nose despite our face. So this, to me, there's not much new here, I would say, except for the fact that there will be more crackdown. I do believe that, and I believe that when we get our next Democrat president, the right better watch itself, because they're going to have they're going to get slapped around by the state then, and we're all going to cheer for it.
You know what I think is different, Andy? This conversation from other previous conversations is I follow what's it called? EFF, the Electronic Frontier Fund, and they have commented on how government using image manipulation for propaganda. U.S. Homeland, I'm reading it here. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem last week posted a photo of the arrest of Nikema Levy Armstrong, one of 3 activists who had entered a St. Paul, Minnesota church to confront a pastor who also served as acting field director of the St. Paul Immigration and Law Enforcement. Like, the fact that the government is manipulating images with, not to say it didn't happen, but now the sophistication of it to trick us to videos and AI, all this realistic imagery is going to confuse us all, that we don't know what will be real and what isn't anymore. And I think that is something that the discussions we've had with Alison McDowell has been predicted. I'm not saying we haven't sort of alluded to it, but I'm just saying, like, it's happened now several times. Like, I think it was, I forget that, a guy from Salvador whose tattoos were also digitally altered. And then this, the arrest of the Nikema Levy Armstrong. Again, it's just the manipulation is going to get stronger. And with the sophistication, I'm just afraid we don't even believe anything. I mean, this just intended to make us think that we're just crazy. We're mad. We don't know what we're talking about. Oh, that's fake, you know? And I am afraid of that. I've been thinking a lot about that, you know? I just wanted to say quickly, because I said I'm so angry at AOC because she voted. I'm sorry. I just wanted to, because I made a comment about her. This is what I was thinking of when I said, I hate her. And when I say I hate her, it is like I don't know her as a person. We're not friends. But who she is as a representative, when she decided to vote no on there was the July 2025 consideration of the Department of Defense Appropriations Act for 2026, and she voted no on Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment to cut $500 million for Israel. That essentially kept the funding intact for funding to Israel, amidst, I thought she was calling it genocide, which it is, but I'm just saying that was like the last straw for me. I was like, I can't, you know what, just. So she made her arguments and she said why. I don't want to hear it. It's like, that's the reason why feel like at the time that I've been tricked so many times. And 2020 was an eye-opener, but that is my reason to it, The other, I didn't anyone want to make any comment on anything I said. If you don't, I wanted to say something else.
I was just laughing because it's so absurd. I mean, the other thing that was such an annoying thing to me was after the election. Then her and Bernie went around talking about, oligarchy.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really been making me very angry lately is hearing the argument that's like, all this is because you people who didn't vote,
But I mean, it is worth.
And I'm like, yeah.
It is worth thinking about how much people had seen the Democrats, again, seemingly were dead after 2024, and what a revitalization has come. You get your Mamdani, now you get your section of the Democrats who are saying, go take your camera out there and make sure you're filming those ICE agents, and
Right.
talking about saying that they're there to protect you. Like they've literally rebuilt themselves again. And I don't know what I'd be looking for, but I would be looking. I think if there was some kind of independent movement, it wouldn't allow these people to grandstand like that. It just wouldn't. They would be like, you aren't welcome here. You want to control the border. We're for open borders. Like we're for not allowing the state to have a single person monitor the Mexican-U.S. border. And that's what I'm like. I don't know if I'm waiting to hear that, or I just need to hear that people have said, we're done with these two parties and we're done with any sort of allowance of any sort of restriction on workers going anywhere. And I don't feel like I'm hearing that. Although I, again, will say, Michael, calling for a general strike is a good thing. Unfortunately, I just believe all this already feels like it's being sopped up by the Democratic Party. Like it's not as like obvious as it was in No Kings, but all those actors of school leaders and union leaders, all those same players, right, who are going to waltz people, Pied Piper people back into the election in about 5 months or 6 months. Maybe it's more than that, but that's why I kind of was hoping Kenny would be here. Kenny Annis, who said that he had been to the demonstrations, and he said he'd heard people talk about socialism. I was wondering what he would be thinking.
I do want to say that a layer, like, to me, what you're saying is obvious. Meaning, like, of course, it's gonna be that way, Andy, until there's some visible, very threatening, organized force, and so that's like. To me, the question is there a layer of people who are learning and consolidating those lessons? Because to me, the indicator would be, are there some kind of significant follow-up demonstrations when nothing happens, right? So I do see, because part of the reason why it's different, one, to have a concrete demand, and two, to be talking about the general strike as a weapon, and not just as like is that people are having the discussion about the need to actually shut down the economy in order to, right? So there's a level of discourse that now leads to much more critical lessons, I think. Of course, it's not going to be able to, like, it's a much better school for what happens next, whether or not, um, ICE is drawn back. And, it looks like at least Trump had to dial back the rhetoric a little bit, right? But to me, of course, it's gonna, it's in the main going to be absorbed into the Democratic Party machine and used that way until there's a significant enough self-conscious minority. I mean, in fact, even when there is an actual self-conscious minority, that's going to be the main dynamic. But the question is there a coherent thing that people know is being built that actually poses an alternative? And that's what doesn't yet coherently exist, which to me would be like a precursor to actually challenging the Democratic Party. So now it looks to me like, will there be some kind of actions with broader, with some kind of broad reach that is in defiance of the congressional Democrats, right? So that to me will be the next kind of indicator if people are able to mobilize in opposition to what the congressional Democrats do. But I don't know. It's like, if people within the class are not learning the lessons of this very concrete class struggle, then of course, then then nothing will happen, right? But until the balance of forces is significantly different, the Democrats are going to be in charge.
But I would say that if people are saying things like, "Oh, well, this is what happens because of this last election, that's why we're seeing this," or they're saying, "Oh my gosh, the elections that are coming are being set up to be stolen by ICE and by things like that."
Right.
It really does tell me that that is the political focus that people see around all these events, and that is a death sentence for anything developing, unless, like you said, some things that people who come out of this and say, "I'm done with the electoral system and I'm done with any immigration, anything," and we, and then those folks, and I'm one of them, have to figure out, what do we do next?
Yeah. To me, it's like, it's not that the people who blaming voters they're not dominating the actual movement. They dominate the electoral system, which will then dominate the
Yeah.
What I'm saying is there's debate. There's clearly debate about those things now, and there's people who are like, wait, doesn't that imply that there's some kind of democracy, right? And there's a growing layer of people who are clear, like, this is not a democracy, right? I mean, even AOC and Bernie going around saying it's an oligarchy, it's like, yeah, and actually you're part of it, right? It's like there's a layer of people who are making the more systemic conclusions, who are seeing much more the structural reasons why these things, but they are certainly not overall hegemonic, right? It's just, are they gonna build? Will they build? Is what I feel like that's the question.
I'm not particularly optimistic. I think the elections are just going to sweep everything up.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Andy, it just seems like you are I'm hearing you. I first year students, Michael, I don't know how much people are informed to understand that this electoral process is a sham. I don't know. And I still will not criticize novice, even innocent people that are falling into that trap, because I know what that was like. But I admire people's, like, I will criticize my former colleagues, and former union reps, former organizers, because I kept telling them during 2020 and they still wouldn't listen. So I don't buy into their sincerity. So their sincerity, quotation marks. That's one. First, I wanted to say that comment. Two, I have been reading, as I have said in the last episode, a lot of Ricardo Flores Magón. And it just, the last article I read, it seems so fittingly, it sounds like what Andy is talking about. And I'd like to actually read that. It's just maybe if we, like, it's only, what, 5 minutes? And he really, like, the Mexican Revolution in 1910, before that, he had been writing and writing and writing to, like, and there was no internet. So to all the workers around Mexico, imagine trying to get your ideas out, and the revolution sparked. And there was this guy, the president Madero, who took over, like a Democrat, took over the movement and was against dictatorship, Porfirio Diaz, in the early 1900s, but was still working under the framework, the capitalist framework. And many people were divided. They should support this guy who was against the dictatorship. And Magon was like, no, don't. Even if he is against the dictatorship, do not support him, because he's only going to give you a different dictatorship, a different level of dictatorship. He is going to trick you. But ultimately he won, and no one listened to Magon. They thought he was crazy. But, you know, the thing is, he really tried to warn the working class that the revolution must not be co-opted, must not be taken over by reformists or liberals. And he criticizes that. And so it is like the way I'm sounding y'all grumpy. It's like the way that I hear it is that is the frustration in seeing how people are being funneled over to the Democrats. So I just thought maybe I could get to that, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fine with me.
All right. This is from the Anarchist Library. I'm going to just get a little bit bigger. This is Ricardo Flores Magón, the anarchist in Mexico. This is dated 1911, and this has been translated from Spanish. From the original article, La lucha de clases, which is the class struggle. Ricardo Flores Magón, class struggle. Remember, this is when Madero, who was this reformist, liberal Mexican president who wanted to get rid of Porfirio Diaz, the dictatorship, and he said, no, we can't allow that. Humanity is divided in two classes, the capitalist class and the working class. The capitalist class possesses the land, the machinery, the means of labor, the mines, the homes, the railways, the ships, and other means of transportation, the factories and the workshops. And as a guardian of all of these, it can count on the government in any of its forms, absolute monarchy, constitutional monarchy, or republic, whether centralized or federal. The working class possesses nothing more than its arms, its brains, and the vital energy which gives it the capacity of performing any kind of labor while it can stay standing on its feet. The capitalist class, under whichever form of government, can live at ease because it has the material means that put it in an advantageous situation with respect to those who have nothing, that is, the workers, and enjoys by these same means a great deal of independence and great deal of freedom, since it can not only satisfy its needs without being dependent on any person, but it is also supported by the government apparatus upon which it does depend, with its laws, judges, cops, soldiers, and prisons. In the end, with all the necessary means to guarantee to the rich the peaceful and free enjoyment of their riches. Andy?
The poor class, by virtue of encountering material wealth hoarded by the rich, is forced to depend upon them. If the poor man wants to work the land, he has to rent himself out for a determined price that is called the wage, and which represents an abrogated part of what he produces with his arms. If the worker wants to work in a factory, in a mine, on a ship, on a railway, on the construction of a home, or any other kind of job, he equally has to rent out his arms in order to receive a wage, which represents always a minimal part of what he produces. It has been calculated that the bosses pay only a tenth the value of what is produced by the workers' labor. And in Mexico, it is even more disproportionate because, as is known, wages in our country are in truth merely alms, 9/10 of what a worker produces passes into the pockets of the boss as profit, although the latter has not been as fatigued to produce it as the worker has.
The profit naturally is sanctioned by the law, which, as I've said many times, has been made, and as are all laws, by the capitalist class, which, of course, has to make laws that benefit its class, laws that protect the exploitation exercised by the masters. These laws prevail everywhere, in all so-called civilized countries, from those ruled by absolute monarchs to those governed by constitutional presidents, such as in the United States and Switzerland, renowned as free countries, as model republics.
The worker, then, is a slave everywhere. A slave in Russia, a slave in the United States, a slave in Mexico, a slave in Turkey, in France, a slave wherever. The famous political freedoms, which Maderismo is a reference to like Chavismo, like Chavez. Maderismo refers to Madero, the president who wanted to take over and was against the dictatorship. The famous political freedoms which Maderismo wants to conquer, such as electoral freedom, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought, and many others, are in truth only tricks which divert the proletariat from its sacred mission, economic freedom. Without economic freedom, it's not possible to enjoy political freedom. There are countries, such as Russia, for example, where there are no political freedoms, and yet the worker is just as unfortunate as he is in the United States, the country which parades around its freedom. In the streets of St. Petersburg, Moscow, or Odessa, you'll see the same rags, the same pallid faces as in the streets of New York or Chicago. This is to say that in Russia, that barbarous and oppressive country, there exists the same problem, the same social question that exists in the United States, the country that boasts of being civilized and free.
In Canada, despite there being no law guaranteeing everyone the right to vote, that is, in that land where there is nothing called universal suffrage, where only those of good fortune have the right to vote, the worker lives with more ease than in the United States, where universal suffrage does exist. That is, where all men of a certain age can elect their governors. This proves that it is not the vote, nor the right of freedom of thought, nor of freedom of assembly, nor is it any other political powers conferred by laws which give the worker something to eat. The right to vote is a sarcasm. Here in the United States, we have proof of this. The people of this nation have always had the right to vote, and nonetheless, the miserable districts of New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Philadelphia, and all the other great American cities are eloquent testimonies to the inefficiency of the vote in bringing about the happiness of the people. In these districts, hundreds of thousands of persons rot, both physically and morally, inside infected human storage rooms, and in the entire nation, every morning, 4 million human beings go out from these palaces of filth and hunger to search for work so they can return with a crumb of bread for their wives and children. But since they often don't find work, they return with empty hands and hungry stomachs. And they go out again the next day on their painful pilgrimage in search of bosses to rent out their arms to. And when election time arrives, these hungry workers hurry to fill all the ballots to elevate another governor who will continue to put the squeeze on their necks.
We have this example in view. Why would we insist on the conquest of the illusory power of the vote? Why wouldn't we dedicate all our energies to the conquest of the lands that are the source of all wealth, that in the hands of the people would secure all life, and in the same way economic independence and its consequence, true freedom? Material well-being is what the people need to be free. That the people take possession of the land and of the instruments of labor is what the Partido Liberal wants. When the people are owners of the land, everything else will fall into their hands through the force of circumstances. Is this crazy? That's what the cowards, the ignorant, and all those who have an interest in the continuation of the current system of exploitation of the working class say. All of those who desire to occupy larger or smaller public offices, all of those who want to live at the expense of others, desire that Madero will triumph. But those sensible working people who possess no more capital than their hands, calloused by the hard work to which they've been subjected by the bourgeoisie, those workers who have understood what regeneration has taught, will not follow Maduro, cannot follow those who make politics their way of life, but instead are liable to continue the class struggle, the struggle against capitalism, until it is made to bite the dust.
Finish it off, Andy.
There are two social classes, that which exploits and that which is exploited. That which exploits has an interest in Maduro's rise to power so that it can continue to exploit. The exploited classes, for its part, has an interest in the land being for everyone, in there being no more bosses, in there being no more misery. Comrades, follow the banner of the Partito Liberal, which has the motto, land and freedom. Pretty cool.
This is before the Russian Revolution,
Yeah.
right?
Well, for sure, is seeing things in terms of class, like two opposing classes that are completely opposing interests, and that there's nothing in elections for us is an important message to be reminded of more than 115 years later.
Yeah. I'll say too, I really appreciate the simplicity of the argument that economic freedom is the true precursor to actual any other kind of freedom. And if you ask, do we live under some kind of economic democracy where people's world needs are met? That's a very obvious answer.
Yep. So I think that might be a good way to end the episode.
Yeah. It's just a reminder for my MAGA folks. There is no savior in Trump or the Republicans, as there's no savior in the Democrats. And I hope that one day that there's that same sentiment trying to be awakened in folks to do something. And the best way to exert your energy is in your local community organizing.
And I would want to say that if you're red and you think that these people who put pronouns on their profiles, you're glad about them getting shot, or if you're blue and you're like, yeah, this person should go down and jail those June, July, or January 6 people, and that's that person was threatening the government. Or in both cases, if you were like, yes, we got to keep people out, we got to defend our borders to protect our jobs and blah blah blah. We are all part of that same working class. And if we're falling into this notion of, yes, capitalist state, kill that worker, or yes, capitalist state, jail them, or keep those people out, keep those workers out, we're literally just falling into the abyss of what this guy's describing, like this world of misery that we will only get freedom from when we start to see each other as part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Well, that concludes this week's episode. Thank you all for highlighting, especially with what's recently happened, as we have had 31 to 32 custody deaths and 6 custody deaths so far this year. So that is what's happening, aside from all the other deaths on site and in person and in plain view. Let's conclude. That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. Again, you can find that. You can find past episodes to this podcast /channel there and connect with us. You can also look at the Spanish language version of What's Left. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here or have anything to say, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. Thank you. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us at our blog. You will certainly get an answer from Andy, and he'll transfer some things to me, as he has recently, and I'm in contact now with Carol. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Raul. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Michael Hoffman and Andy Lipson. Check us out next time. Thank you all for listening. Ciao, ciao.